Again, you will notice that the amount of taxes received from the city of Maplewood is about $7,000 a year. And that if you're considering your tax increment financing, that as you heard in the presentation, that will freeze that, that at that time for the 25 years. And that as was looked at Gethsemane, if we're looking at senior housing, to consider as part of that issue that you require that the developer pay additional fees on an annual basis to help pay for the increased medical calls that will be generated if it is indeed used for senior citizens. And again, I think that's an important thing to look at. And looking at another thing that I think is important in considering the issues and looking at what is, whether or not if you should simply ask your staff to do a more complete memorandum, is that I just looked at the title today at Ramsey County, and I will tell you, it wasn't there before and it isn't there now. There is no lien on that property with regard to the clearing costs for the removal of the mobile homes. There isn't any such lien. And, you know, this says that there is, there isn't. And so I'm asking that maybe you find other additional time and ask your staff to clarify many of these things before you call a public hearing.
Is there any reason that you would not acknowledge that I want your attention?
Pardon me?
Because she was speaking.
Yes, well, you're not speaking to the topic. This is all stuff that would be fine stuff to talk about when we have a public hearing that has to do with it. I don't see how this is relevant to whether or not the council decides to have a public hearing.
Okay. What was the date? What is the date of the TIF application that's being considered?
I don't know.
Could we have a clarification on that? If you're calling a hearing on the application, I'd like to know the date, please.
Oh, when we would hold the public hearing?
No, the date of the TIF application that you're holding the hearing on.
Okay. Do we know what the date is of the application?
Mayor and Council, I don't have the specific application in front of me, but Mr. Camford and I were looking at each other. We think it's the end of April when the application came in sometime. I don't have the specific date with the application in front of me.
It was announced to us that by Mr. Kanico that the application was checked in.
Okay.
In recent memory.
Okay. And will that copy of that application be available for citizens so they can review it?
Sure that it is, as all documents always are, Diana, but you know.
Okay, then I would like to submit my data practices request to please send that to my address at 1321 Cross. Thank you.
Thank you. I trust there was no one else that wanted to talk on this particular item. All right, Council, what would you like to do?
I would make a motion to adopt a resolution calling for a public hearing to consider a tax increment financing housing district numbers 1 through 10 for the shores of Maplewood within the Gladstone redevelopment area.
All right, so we have had a motion made by Ms. Wozlak and seconded by Ms. Juneman, which would call for a public hearing at which we would consider a tax increment financing housing district for housing district number 1-10. Mr. Nephew.
Just in terms of discussion on the motion, I do plan to vote in favor of the resolution calling for the public hearing. And I just want to say that I particularly appreciate that the report you brought to us is going to include those different alternatives. And I think that there have been valid concerns, as we saw, for instance, on Gethsemane, on pilot payments and things of that sort, with respect to the increased costs that the city can have by having added need of services and so forth. And I'm also, just personally, just kind of at a gut level, more interested in, particularly if there's any kind of bonding going on in the assessment approach on it, more than the other part. But I think staff has made a good point that obviously without TIF, the project wasn't getting going in the first place, and so there's some argument for us to keep our mind open
there other comments? Any other discussion? Hearing none, I will call the vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's ayes all. So we will have a hearing coming up on the 26th. Move on into new business. First item is Wiper Avenue, Center D improvements, project